Welcome in, everyone. Here with special guest Ahmed Gafir, who covers Maryland for Inside the Black and Gold. Ahmed, thanks for joining me.
Appreciate you having me on, Christian.
I have to start with a quick ode to last year. What an incredible basketball team Maryland was. That starting five was just awesome to watch. Three guards you just hit on in the portal.
Yeah.
You bring in stud five-star Derek Queen, and then Julian Reese is back. Everything meshes. They're great on both ends. Awesome team. But, there's a buzzer beater to make the Sweet 16. But, of course, the Kevin Willard situation just kind of put a bad taste in the mouth of Maryland fans, even
Yeah.
on what should have been a great season. So, any thoughts on just what last season was and the way Kevin left? And of course, we'll get to the new era upon
Yeah.
us right after.
Absolutely. I mean, I think last season was probably, for me, was probably the most fun that I've had watching Maryland basketball. There's been some good seasons, the 2019, 2020 season, I thought was, I mean, they finished with a share of the Big Ten regular season title. But for me, it was the 2009, 2010 season. That was the Gravis Vasquez senior season. It just kind of felt like, sounds kind of corny, but felt magical just watching those teams, going at NC State, at Virginia Tech, being down and bouncing back. And Maryland, they had some tough losses last year. The Michigan State buzzer beater, had Maryland been able to pull it out, they would have been able to have a shot at winning at least a share of the Big Ten regular season championship. But like you said, I think just the way that it ended just really kind of left a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. Really by the time Maryland was preparing for the Sweet 16, really that Monday, that Tuesday, it was kind of became an open secret that, Kevin Willard was going to leave, that, Maryland, all the press conference talk was, simply just talk, and no tangible development or improvements would come from, airing out all your dirty laundry about the university. So I would say it just kind of sucked the air out of the way that the season ended. And even that Sweet 16 loss, Florida obviously went on to win national championship, but it just kind of felt, the last 6, 7 minutes of the game that, this was it, with about 4 or 5 minutes left. Kevin Willard pulled all the starters out. Guys like Julian Reese didn't really get a chance to get that standing ovation from the crowd. So I think just the way that it ended, just really stinks. Obviously, Kevin Willard is public enemy number one in the DMV now, and I think the decision to consistently back and stand behind how he exited and all of his actions is just a little bit immature. But yeah, it's now we're in the modern era, and new coaches and new roster. But like you said, I think that the on court results last year, I think that was the type of season where, for Maryland, when you kind of struggle to really recruit and open the doors to, the young fan base of people that are coming up, the kids who just watch sports for the love of it. Last season was one of those seasons where, you get fans that tune into something like that, and they become Maryland basketball diehard fans. So like I said, just really really bad way for it all to end, but definitely was fun to watch along the way.
Well said. And, you know, of course, this is just what college basketball is these days. But the other part that sucks is Jacoby Gillespie and Rodney Rice are still here. Most likely they're not wooed from the portal if Willard doesn't go. But I mean, you're bringing in Buzz Williams, who is a proven winner, of course, at this level. He makes the tournament. He might not have the highest ceiling, which is something we can kind of get onto later. But like, the dude knows how to win, and while the style of basketball might be as aesthetically pleasing at all times as some other programs in the country, everyone plays incredibly hard, and the players love Buzz and they
Yeah.
win. So brings with him some of his guys from Texas A&M. But first, before we get into this roster, just Buzz Williams, how has the program, the community, just welcomed him in as the next coach of Maryland basketball?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of it was an interesting way that I think it all kind of unraveled, because, we just talked about the Willard, but, a huge part of the Willard thing was Maryland's athletic director leaving really at the start of the tournament. So Willard, or Buzz, when he arrived, he was, Dr. Pines, the school president, played a really big role. But, Colleen Sorum, who's now the deputy athletic director at SMU, she was interim AD at Maryland. So, it's been interesting to kind of see, how that process plays out. A head coach coming in weeks before the permanent AD is in. So I think, with and Buzz, with him bringing a lot of his Texas A&M flavor, the entire coaching staff Kyle Tarp was strength and conditioning coach. I mean, he's been here close to 2 decades now. He's no longer with the program. So I would say right now, a lot of Maryland fans are just kind of looking at this situation and, the name recognition. I think that's kind of the big thing that Maryland fans are kind of struggling with. In terms of Buzz himself, I think there's a lot of appreciation for recognizing that, he came in, he had 15 spots. There was, I think you talked about Jacoby Gillespie and Rodney Rice. I think Gillespie, I think there was still a good chance that he could have departed. Rodney Rice, I think he could have stayed. And, when Buzz Williams arrived, there was a lot of talk that Rodney Rice was still interested and, talk of a potential discount and whatnot. And then, he ends up getting a bag over at USC. So whether, all that is really true, it really is kind of up in the air and up for speculation. But, for Buzz Williams to kind of lean on his, four Aggies, Pharrell Payne, Solomon Washington. I mean, I think within 10, 15 minutes of Buzz Williams being announced as head coach, I got a text saying Pharrell Payne was coming with them. And you talked about, just Buzz being loved by all of his players. And I think there's an appreciation that, that message rings true, whether it's the players that did come with him from Texas A&M or a guy like Miles Rice, who Buzz has been open about. He recruited both times. Miles Rice was in the portal and, was on a visit at Texas A&M when Buzz Williams took the Maryland job and kind of, working that. And, you talk about the coaching staff as well, Devin Johnson, Lyle Wolf, Steve Roccaforte, all these guys have been with Buzz Williams for a long, long time. So that aspect of him being what seems to be, a good person, especially, after Kevin Willard, I think that's something that, a lot of fans really like. But I think just really in terms of what to expect on the court, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, just with a lot of these new pieces, 15 new pieces that kind of need to gel together. I think there's, kind of wait and see mode to see, what this team really looks like this year. But in terms of Buzz himself, I think, he's doing a good job. A couple weeks after he took the job, him and his entire staff went out to Baltimore, PG County, DC, to check in on all of these power brokers in the area, whether they're coaches, whether they're AAU coaches, high school coaches, just to make sure that, that Buzz Williams has some of these recruiting ties from his time back at Virginia Tech, but really hitting the DMV and making his name known. You heard a little bit of feedback, from local people saying that, Maryland shouldn't have been late on some folks. Maryland should have gotten in earlier, but I think, Buzz, you can't really question his effort through these first couple months.
Let's get into his roster. Let's start with the aforementioned Pharrell Payne, who was who's we know he's been a good player, but was a monster in the NCAA tournament. Had like 26 points, double-doubles both games. He started at Minnesota, so back in the Big Ten. I know he played well in that exhibition. Tell me about Pharrell Payne. Is the expectation that he can be as good as he was in those two games for an entire season?
Yeah, I mean the buzz really this consistently this offseason has kind of been that Pharrell Payne is going to kind of be that alpha dog, probably that leader on the team. Kind of behind him has kind of been maybe the biggest question. Whether it's a guy like Solomon Washington who steps up or Darius Adams who can kind of fill that role as a freshman, Elijah Saunders. But in terms of Pharrell Payne, I expect him to play heavy minutes at the 5. And I think the other side of it, and I was talking with someone about this at the exhibition game on Monday, but I think a guy like Pharrell Payne, if he gets in foul trouble or if he gets injured, this Maryland team is going to look a lot different. I think one thing that stuck out, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but just with so many guys out for that exhibition game on Monday, it was kind of hard to take away too much concrete. But one thing that was clear was the commitment to the board. Felt like every single time there was a shot in the air, there were 3-4 guys, whether they were guards or bigs, in the paint to crash the board. And Pharrell Payne, Solomon Washington, both those guys are going to be a big piece. But Pharrell Payne, I mean, I think on the first 4 or 5 possessions on Monday night, Pharrell Payne got a touch. And I think playing through him, getting him activated, getting him comfortable is kind of the big thing. And like you said, I think that this is a chance for him to really build on what was a strong showing in the NCAA tournament last year.
Yes, I kind of somewhat passed over this, but to anyone listening who isn't deep in the college basketball streets, you might not have known that Texas A&M was number 1 in offensive rebounding percentage in the country for back-to-back years. This is what Buzz does. He throws everyone at the glass. Everyone plays incredibly hard on both ends, diving on the floor, and that's, some of his guards could get criticized for chucking, if you will, but
Yep.
that's kind of the game plan. He gives those kind of guards confidence to play and to get shots up because he knows that just the will and the pursuit of the basketball from his guys in the offensive glass is going to be at the highest level of anyone in the country. So setting the table here, I'm excited about some of these guards, but you were telling me about these injuries. Can you just give me a quick run through?
Yeah.
Who's healthy? Who's hurt? Like, where are we at right now?
Yeah, it's been an interesting last few weeks. Marquise Passmore, he is going to miss the entire season with the torn Achilles. The program announced that about close to a month ago at this point. On Monday, Miles Rice, Solomon Washington, and Passmore were all spotted in boot. Solomon Washington, I think that he might be maybe early to mid-November, probably the week of the Marquette Alcorn State game. So I think the second week of the regular season, which could be his potential return. Diggy Coit, he was out. He was Kansas transfer. Potential that he's available for the season opener. Isaiah Watts, he was also inactive for the exhibition. There's a chance that he's available, battling an eye injury. He's available for the regular season. And Colin Metcalf, excuse me. He was also banged up in preseason. He only played about a minute in the exhibition game, so he was also banged up. So a lot of these guys are supposed to be key pieces for Maryland. And then Darius Adams, he's healthy now. He played on Monday and looked really good. I believe he played all 40 minutes. Played all 40 minutes. But he midway through the summer, he was also battling a wrist injury. So just a lot of bumps and bruises. Some of these, a lot of these, obviously Passmore is out for the season, but a lot of these, maybe just take some time, a couple weeks into the season. And, with 15 new pieces, I think it doesn't really help, especially when you have early season matchups against Georgetown, Marquette, and then the Players Era tournament with Gonzaga being the second game. So some tough matchups for this Maryland team to really find its chemistry on the court.
So of this 8-man portal class, I think you named 5 guys who were injured. So that's not ideal. But for now, other than Passmore, who's out for the season, I want to just kind of presume health for the rest of these guys and just say, like, we're talking about it's a long season. So let's just presume health for now. Like, what is the starting backcourt? Is it Miles Rice and Isaiah Watts?
Yeah, I think that would likely be the pick. Seems like Miles Rice, whether he can kind of be that starter or a big scoring guard, whether he's finds a success slashing. But I also do see Diggy Coit being a pretty big piece in the backcourt. Whether it's a starter or kind of that sixth man, seems like he's going to be kind of that veteran to really stabilize ball handling duties. Andre Mills and Darius Adams, both capable as well, but really seems like Coit will be a big piece in that.
So Coit was at Northeastern, I think.
Northern Illinois, and then he transferred over at Kansas last year.
Okay, I knew he was at Kansas last year. I was trying to remember that small school. I think I was Colin Metcalf being from Northeastern is what threw me off there. I knew it was started with North, but so Miles Rice has went through a lot. He was stuck in the kind of dysfunction of Indiana last year. Isaiah Watts is a guy who I really like. I have a specific memory. He hit a huge shot to beat Drake in the NCAA tournament for Washington State the year they were a 7 seed 2 years ago on that team with Miles Rice as a teammate. But Watts came off the bench in that game, and I just remember he received the ball from Jalen Wells was calling for the ball. Jalen Wells in the Memphis Grizzlies, and Isaac Jones in the Sacramento Kings was trying to get the ball in the post. And Isaiah Watts just pulls a deep three and drains it as this true freshman coming off the bench. And ever since then, I've kind of monitored him because I'm like, this kid has some big balls to take that shot with 2 NBA guys asking for the ball. But he's just this lengthy guard with a lot of energy, who's pesky defensively and can really shoot the ball from 3. And that is just such a Buzz Williams guard to me. As sure, Isaiah Watts, take 8 threes this game. Like, why not? You're going to get the opportunities on kickouts from the offensive rebound, and then as a guy who with that length can pressure the ball a lot. So he's a guy that I think this is a perfect fit in the system. Have you been hearing positive things about him, or is just the injury?
I think he'd really be an X factor because I think when you kind of look at what maybe this Maryland team does well and what maybe he's kind of a concern or area of growth. You talked about the offensive rebounding, but the 3-point shooting is probably really. Maryland started out 1 of 6 from 3, and Darius Adams hit the second, and then ended up being a barrage of three consecutive threes in a row. But really, before that, Maryland really didn't show much ability to score outside of the paint. But again, Isaiah Watts wasn't available. I think he's a guy. He's probably an X factor for Maryland to be able to stretch the floor a little bit. I kind of view Watts, Darius Adams, and maybe a little bit of Elijah Saunders. I think he's capable, not maybe as proven, but all three of those guys to be able to help Maryland stretch the floor a little bit. So I do think that Watts really has that impact and really the ability to break up what could what some view as a potential cold streaks during conference play. I think Watts could be a guy to kind of break that ice.
Skipped over Elijah Saunders here a bit. So San Diego State, then Virginia, big, strong, skilled forward. Is he a guy that's going to be a beast on the offensive glass? I feel like everyone kind of is, but he's a versatile weapon. What have you been hearing about him?
Yeah, I think he'll be a guy. I think obviously he'll be a big piece on the board as well. I mean, I think on Monday it took him a little bit of time to kind of get settled. He finished with 13 points, and 11 of those came in the second half. But I think he's going to be a guy that can kind of capitalize on the pick and pop, where you have Pharrell Payne really controlling the paint. I see a guy like Miles Rice and Elijah Saunders in the pick and roll, and then Pharrell Payne down low. I think that's a type of trio where you have some options on offense to kind of keep the defense honest. So I think that's kind of where he can really be a big piece. But Buzz Williams talking about him at Big Ten Media Day, talking about really just the type of person that he is on and off the court, and maybe his offensive skill set kind of differs a little bit from guys like Pharrell Payne and Solomon Washington. So being able to lean into that versatility a little bit, but I do think that he will play a key role, and I think that was as key of a pickup in the front court as Payne was.
I don't mean to pass over Darius Adams, this freshman. Tell me about him, what his game is like, and how good he can be this year.
Yeah, I thought he looked good on Monday. I think there were ebbs and flows, but for a freshman, kind of getting going, I thought he was probably the second best player on the court. Finished with 19 points. Did finish 3 of 13 shooting, with 2 of those being from three. 11 to 13 from the free throw line. I believe in the scrimmage, the secret scrimmage, I guess we still call it that, against West Virginia. He had similar numbers at the free throw line. So Buzz Williams, he was open about that post game. Leaning on Maryland, for Maryland to lean on, getting to the free throw line, getting those extra opportunities to score. And I think Darius Adams will be a big piece of that. I know he drew votes for Big Ten Freshman of the Year. I think he's in that conversation. I don't know that he'd be maybe a top 2, top 3 candidate, but you can really kind of see his ability to kind of create for himself, create offensively, and I think he'll be a big part of Maryland's identity this season.
A lot of other freshmen came in, a couple redshirt freshmen. Who's ready to play? Who's going to factor in here? Because Buzz wants to use a lot of guys, and especially if everyone's injured, we're going to see a lot of these guys play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 2 Texas A&M transfers that redshirted last year, Andre Mills and George Turkson. Mills finished with 6 points, 3 of 9 from the field. I believe he scored all 6 of those points early on. George Turkson, he finished perfect 3 for 3, posted a double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds in his first college game. And Turkson, I thought, was interesting. Buzz kind of talked about him with Maryland battling all these injuries. Turkson was a guy that kind of had to play in one of those guard roles. And I thought he looked really good, maybe a little bit of an undersized 4, but really athletic, has a really good shot, but also good form. You can kind of see that he has that ability to score inside and out. And then obviously with 10 rebounds, he did a good job on the boards, as all Buzz Williams players do. But I think Mills and Turkson, I expect both those guys to play key roles. Guillermo Del Pino, he's a Spanish guard. He was playing actually with Spain in the U18 earlier this summer. I think he's a potential redshirt candidate. Alex Alston, I think he's a potential redshirt candidate as well. And Josiah Harper, I think, but all 3 of those guys, maybe take some time to factor into the rotation. But Colin Metcalf, he's a Northeastern transfer, like you mentioned earlier. I think he'll play big minutes behind the 5, behind Pharrell Payne at the 5. So I think this rotation could be about 8-9 deep by the time conference play rolls around. I think, but I do think that the starting five is kind of close to set in stone.
So going back to Miles Rice, you mentioned that Buzz had been in pursuit of him other times where he was in the portal. Is there something about any stories about just their relationship, or does Buzz see a really special fit of him within the system, or does he just really like the kid? Like, do you know? Can you just kind of explain that connection between them?
Yeah, Buzz actually, and actually, it's on Twitter now. On Texas A&M Twitter has found it. So I guess backstory: Miles Rice was on day two of his official visit at Texas A&M when Buzz Williams was, I guess, got the offer to become the Maryland basketball, the next head coach for Maryland basketball. So it was definitely a system fit. Buzz was transparent. I didn't recruit Miles Rice to Maryland. I recruited him to play for me. Buzz Williams tried to go in after him the year prior before Miles Rice ended up at Indiana. It does really seem like Buzz really zeroed in on Miles to kind of lead this system. I believe Miles was the first non-Aggie transfer to announce his transfer to Maryland. It was only about week after Buzz Williams was officially announced as head coach. So I think that chemistry, that relationship that they had, the pre-existing relationship that they had in the portal, and Buzz Williams kind of really needing that lead guard. I think that was just kind of perfect match.
I know I jumped around a lot here. Maryland was one of the toughest teams to approach
Yeah,
just because of we have
so
to talk
many
about
men.
Wood, we have to talk about Buzz, we have to talk about these injuries. So there was just a lot. But was there anyone, whether it was Diggy Coy coming over from Kansas, who I know he's a really good 3-point shooter and probably is a little bit not a great taste in his mouth from just they were very up and down. His playing time was up and down. Or a Colin Metcalf come from Northeastern, a guy who I don't know much about. Or even a Solomon Washington, who I know his game as a guy coming over from A&M as a big who will play really hard. But I didn't give these guys the one by one time that typically I do in these. So
Yeah.
go ahead if you have anything on those guys.
No, I mean, I think, again, I kind of just, what we talked about earlier. I just think it'll be really interesting to see how this team really gels together. I mean, really all offseason, a lot of the feedback, obviously, they have runs and whatnot, but a lot of it is centered around, short drills, short practice times, very specific details in what they're doing. And, Buzz was very clear that, defensively, we're going to be on point offensively. I think even Darius Adams said, give us, patience. We'll be good, but it's hard to explain what this offense is going to look like. And I think it's just kind of a good explanation of kind of what you'd expect this Maryland team to look like this year, just with this blend of Aggies and portal additions and freshmen trying to get their footing. I think it might take about maybe 2-3 weeks. Maybe we see this Maryland team really start to hit its stride for the Players Era tournament, the Thanksgiving week. But I think there are a lot of individual pieces that for good measure, Maryland fans should be optimistic on what they can do this season. But it'll be really, really, really interesting to see how it officially becomes a team.
Yeah, I think this is a. I feel confident this team has enough talent to be top half of the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament conversation. It's just will people be healthy and will the pieces come together? Is that kind of your approach to it as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I said it earlier, but I feel like the biggest question is Maryland. What can Maryland prove that they can score outside the paint? I think that's going to be a big, big part of the equation in conference play. I expect for El Payne to be a big guy for Maryland, and yeah, Big Ten obviously has some great bigs, and that first game against Michigan is going to be a great test for Payne. But I think whether Maryland can really outscore outside the paint will, I think, determine what Maryland's ceiling is this year. But you're right. I do think this is a tournament caliber team. I do think that this is probably a bubble team, closer to a bubble than maybe lock is we should never use that word, but I guess a lock to make the tournament. Yeah, again, I think it'll be a competitive season for sure.
I know I
Mhm.
already gave my Isaiah Watts rant, but I just want to flag plant that as hard as I can of that is my guy. Like I don't do this that often. I don't want to be the guy who says he has 20 guys and then when two of them are good, he victory dances. But I really think Isaiah Watts could. Maybe it's next year, but I really think this year he's a guy that could hit 7, 8 threes in a game. Like, I think he just has so much potential. His grandfather also is Slick Watts, who played for
Yeah.
the Supersonics. It's in his blood. Like, this kid is cold. I think he's a winner, and I love what he does on both ends. So if he ends up being a stud, I just want my credit because I
You,
think he's a great fit in the system, and I'm a fan of his.
Buzz will get the credit for development, but you'll get the credit for the pick. I promise.
Yeah, it's a vote in confidence in Buzz also of getting more out of him than Washington State was
Yeah, that's
last year
true.
as well. But thanks for coming on and breaking it down with me. Obviously a lot of moving pieces in Maryland, but like we kind of covered earlier, Buzz Williams is a really good coach. Like we know how he raises the floor of a program. He goes and he wins, and he rebuilds quickly. So Maryland is in good hands with Buzz Williams.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be interesting first year. I know Buzz, sometimes does take that year or two to really hit the ground running, but I think Maryland fans are excited to turn the page over last spring's fiasco, and we shall see how it shakes out. But Christian, definitely appreciate you having me on, man.
Thanks, man.